welcome and thank you for Don Neal filling the room for this MPC Guest Author Series event featuring Christopher Moore.
I went to Microsoft the next day. The people at Microsoft are awesome. You know, probably because their computers are all locked up. But they were lovely, you know, but the Google people were just like, all I saw was the tops of their heads, you know, because we have work to do. Get to the massage guy. So I wrote that vampire book, and then I decided I was like having this problem with what was going on politically in the country. Because I don't know if you remember what happened after 2000. But I did not approve of a lot of what happened after 2000. A lot I didn't approve. And I wanted to write a book about a fool, because a fool's job in the court was he was the only one that could speak truth to power. So I went to New York, and I hadn't sort of gelled. I just knew I wanted to write a book about a fool. And I was going to have lunch with my editor. New York makes me very, 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 very anxious. I have trouble sleeping there. And so I'd taken a sleeping pill and I didn't go to sleep, and I took another one and I didn't go to sleep, and I took a Xanax, and I guess I finally went to sleep. But anyway, and about 4 hours later I went and I had breakfast with my editor. And I don't remember a lot about that breakfast, but I remember I said, I want to write a book about a fool. But I don't know if I want it to just be like a generic fool, or if it should be Lear's fool, because King Lear's fool is probably the most famous fool in literature. And she said, oh, it has to be King Lear's fool, which was the end of her involvement. And I had to go learn the canon of Shakespeare, you know, which I may not have done if I had not been highly drugged. I wouldn't have given her the choice, but there was no one to blame but myself. So, now what you learn from that story is don't do that. And so I wrote this book, Fool, and I went to England. Because again, like, even though England has changed somewhat since, you know, the 4th century BC, which is when King Lear really would have taken place. I couldn't set it then because there weren't really castles and earls and dukes and all the things that there were in King Lear, because Shakespeare just made that shit up. So I sort of set it in a mythical 13th century, and I went to, what I learned in England was, well, let's see, people say sorry a lot. If you walk around London, just kind of walk around the streets all day, you can be apologized to 300, 400, 500 times. You know, everybody, you know, when they go like, they're like, sorry, nobody says excuse me, or pardon me. And evidently they laugh because they think that you just farted. But they all say, it's all like, sorry, sorry, and you start to think, hey, you know, you start to feel like as if you deserve it. You know, that they were like, sorry, and you go, you better be. So that's the thing. What else did I learn? Oh, I learned why they drive on the left. This is if you wasted your money and your time tonight, this is what you'll know why you drive on the left. Because most swordsmen are right-handed. And when you're on a horse, if you've got your sword so you can draw it with your right hand, the sword is sticking out on the left. So if you drive on the right, as you go by a horseman going the other way, your sword's hit, and then you have to kill each other. And the only other place that you have to drive on the left is Japan, and because of the samurai and the swords. So basically now, when you go to England, you will be killed by a car when you step off the curb because of a tradition that was set up in the 8th century. But that's why, it's the sword thing. Okay, so that's useful, I think. That'll be a Jeopardy question. Oh, elevators talk there. I thought Douglas Adams made that up, but they really did. You're arriving at the 2nd floor. Sorry. It's disconcerting. You know? Mind the gap. Sorry. So, other things I learned in England, a dog's breakfast is bad, but the dog's bollocks is good. If somebody says, oh, that's the dog's bollocks, that's really good. And I mentioned that to somebody, and this English guy I've known for years, he said, well, you know why, don't you? And I said, no. And he goes, well, that's why they're licking it all day. It must be great. And I was like, good to know. You know, you think about the English Bulldog. Have you ever seen an English Bulldog going the other way? There is a star to that show. It's the dog's box. Sweaters are called jumpers. People who jump up and down are called sweaters. Pants are called trousers. Panties are pants. So that's not confusing. If someone knocks you up, they're coming around to your house. A rubber is erasing something. You use a rubber to erase something. I did an entire semester of photography college in Santa Barbara, and one of my classmates was from Zambia, so she was educated in England, and we were asking all these questions about procedures in mounting prints. It's a very specific, photography school is very sort of painful, retentive, detailed kind of thing. And she said, "Are we allowed to use rubbers?" But she didn't mean that. A fuzzy rubber is what you use on a dry erase board, so not nearly as much fun. There is no castle at Newcastle, and it's not new. All there is in Newcastle, other than a big industrial town, is a piece of Hadrian's Wall, which the Emperor Hadrian built to keep the Picts in Scotland. And if you think so, that'll be impressive, right? It's like about this tall. I mean, I don't know how that kept the Scots out, except they were like, "Oh no, hey, look at my kilt." Anyway, and that was when we went to Scotland, and I found out that you couldn't speak English, you couldn't understand a Scotsman. I went to Pizza Hut to eat because I thought they would sneak haggis on anything. And I was like, I'm gonna see that on a pizza, you know? And I went into Pizza Hut and I ordered like a pepperoni and mushroom, and the guy asked me something. I don't know what it was. He asked me 8 times, and I finally went, I'm gonna go get Chinese food. I don't know what they said. So anyway, that was awesome. So I wrote that book, Fool. I should probably go to questions. I wrote this other book. During this time after I wrote Les Lizard and before I wrote Lamb and then kind of after Fluke, and in there my mom died. And she got colon cancer, and I went to Ohio to take care of her for the last 5 months of her life. I was her primary caretaker. And that happened. And so then I came home and I wrote Lamb and I wrote Fluke. And in the meantime, Charlie's mom died, and Charlie was her primary caretaker. So I sort of thought I'd learned something about death and dying. And I thought, I'm going to write a book about death and dying. And it's going to be a comedy. And so I wrote a book called A Dirty Job, which is my response to that. And I don't know what to tell you about that. It's there's a few scenes in that book that are pulled right out of our 2 experiences. The character Charlie, has anybody read that book? The character Charlie's mom's death scene in Arizona, that's my mom. That's all that stuff happened with my mom. Like, she was like really worried about her appearance, you know, and flossing. And it's like, Mom, you're terminal. You don't have floss. You know, I mean, for me, I'm not. I mean, yes, we're all dying, but not within seeable distance. And but as soon as I get the news, I'm not flossing. You fuck flossing. I mean, it's like, people going, that could be habit forming. Dude, I've like 3 months to live. I can handle a habit. So, but anyway, that was my mom. And then the woman who is eating the cheese, and sort of just every bit of her being is in eating the cheese in that book. That's Charlie's mom. Although it's liverwurst, and I just didn't have the heart to put it in that. And so those worked. What we had learned, I'll tell this story and then we'll go to questions. Because Sacral Blue is a whole, that takes another hour. But what we learned in that was when we brought hospice in, and it was awesome organization. I recommend it highly. And they've done this before. They know how to deal with it. And they brought in all these medications and so forth. And the other thing I would recommend is you're under a lot of stress if you're taking care of someone who's dying. Take their medication because it really takes the edge off, because there's a point where you're caring for someone where you go, well, they might not die, but I might kill them. And if you just like slam a half a Xanax, you're kind of fine. You're like, oh, that's great. Let me make you some cereal. But when someone dies, hospice comes in. And they take all of the drugs and they pour them into a big bowl, like a mixing bowl, a big plastic Tupperware mixing bowl. I mean, just, all the anti-anxieties and tranquilizers and muscle relaxants and painkillers and painkillers and painkillers. And they put them in a big bowl and they go, I need you to witness this. And you go, okay, and Charlie and I are standing in the bathroom and then they pour them into the toilet. And I had only inherited those like minutes before. This is a sad day already. You just poured all my drugs in the toilet. So that was with my mom. And then, so when Charlie's mom died, and the hospice people came, and they go like, and they're like, they pick up the pill bottle, and there's like one, like, blue meanie, and there's like a little rattle, 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 and they go, this it? You go, that's it. I'm like, well, I guess I won't need this big mixing bowl. And you're like, we're being sad. And she was like, you're going to need to witness this. Okay, here we are. We're witnessing the shit out of this. She's like, so, learn from our experience.